Simple questions for 100 people. Welcome to the experiment. I'm Bill Correll, and this is my investigation. My research project to gather data from 100 beautiful human beings for the sole purpose to see what actually happens across the interviews. Now, the questions are fixed and all the interviews will remain consistent, with the variable being the actual participants themselves and their answers. It says, if Dave, I'm having you come sit on my porch and share your thoughts so I can learn about people. Now, looking forward to what we're going to know after we're done with this whole thing and have interviewed 100 people. But in the process, I'm very interested in your story and what life is like for you. So I'm going to just go ahead and get started here. What is your full name?
My full name, Bill, is David Joseph Anthony Roberts, and I have two middle names, and there's a story behind that.
I like that.
There's a story behind that. Joseph was the middle name that my mother and father gave me at birth, and then they added Anthony onto it because that was my confirmation name, and that was typical in the Catholic Church that I went to, that we would take our confirmation name as part of our full name. And so on my enhanced driver's license is David Joseph Anthony Roberts, but I always tell everybody my middle name is Joseph because it would take me too long to explain why I got two middle first names.
So your initials are DJAR.
DJAR, yes. And I don't usually go by that acronym, but now I might have to, just because you dubbed me with DJAR.
You can put that on your business card now. Thanks to me. My confirmation name is Joseph.
Another path of alignment for the two of us.
There you go. My mom, her birthday was the 19th of March. Mine's 21st, and I think the 20th is Joseph's Day. So there's something about that. But my mom converted to Catholicism.
Yeah, I was born Catholic, raised in the Catholic Church, went to one-room schoolhouse, was an altar boy, and then when I was old enough to walk away from organized religion, I did. And now I consider myself, in the words of one of my favorite authors, Kent Nurburn, to be a guerrilla spiritualist. So I take a little bit of Buddhism, a little bit of Native American teachings of animals and nature, a little bit of ecotherapy, and that formulates the framework that I have to create awareness of myself and my relationship to the world around me. So
I like that. And I really think that that's a journey that all of us go on as we get, to different parts of our life, and things don't necessarily seem to make sense to be a blind believer, if you will. But was the mass still in Latin when you were an altar boy?
Yeah, it was. Thankfully, I didn't have to learn Latin, but there were parts of the mass that were in Latin.
Yep.
Now, I also was raised in, I'm half Lebanese as well, too. So another church that I went to was a Maronite Catholic church. And the mass was in Lebanese, but I didn't understand Lebanese. So, I could just kind of go off in my own little world and think about something else, and because I didn't understand the language. So.
Well, we had these really cool laminated cards in front of us when we were altar boys, and you go down, a tutua,
Yeah.
So
and I just basically lip synced everything with the mass, Bill.
Exactly. Great. It was performance art, wasn't it? At the age of 8.
Yes. Yeah, very much so. I hadn't looked at it like that until you just mentioned it. But yeah, it could be considered a form of performance art.
So, DJAR, what's your favorite nickname that most people don't know?
Well, I had a high school English teacher at Notre Dame High School in Utica, New York, where I'm from. His name was Dave Brown. Great sense of humor. He gave everybody in his English class nicknames. He gave me the nickname of Oral for the famous evangelist Oral Roberts.
Yeah.
So every time he would see me, he would just do one of these, raise his hands and do the heel sign and call me Oral. So that was my nickname in high school. I certainly don't go by that now, but not too many people know of my high school history. So you're the first one I've told.
Well, it's our secret, okay?
Well, yeah, and that and how many ever listeners you have listening to this podcast, it'll be their secret too. So
Hopefully, it'll be a few million at some point.
I hope so. And if a few million can keep my secret, great.
They're sworn to secrecy now. Okay, guys, you got that? So I love it. And when, oral, so that's, is that something that stayed with you for a while, or it kind of went away when you got out of high school, kind of deal?
Kind of went away when I got out of high school because when I went to college, I left that part of my history separate. Um, and when I got to college, I realized that nobody really cared as much about what you did in high school as we thought they were going to do. So it was more about
Yeah.
planning for the present, looking at the future. So my high school years never came up as a topic of conversation at all, Bill.
And I suspect you weren't all that interested in everybody else's high school career either.
No, I kind of learned at a young age to kind of mind my own business because I
Sure.
tell people I have enough trouble minding my business, much less minding somebody else's business. So I just learned to be respectful of boundaries and not really pry too much into other people's personal lives.
Excellent. So, Dave, when did you first notice what color hair you had?
That's a good question. I really had to struggle with that because I never really took notice. I mean, I always knew I had brown hair, but honestly, I first began to notice that my hair started. I went from like blonde when I was a little kid to now like I brown hair. And I look back at pictures, and anyways, I think as we get older, I can speak for me. I tend to look at my past. It's part of, I guess, determining the milestones in my life and looking back to see at this point, have I made the impact that I want to make in my life? So doing that, I looked at old childhood pictures and I realized that my hair had a variety of different transformation of colors. I was blonde and then eventually it turned into brown. And now while I have headphones on, I have a receding hairline. Um, so
Very
I, yeah, very distinguished receding hairline. And so essentially, I began to notice not so much the age of when I first noticed my color of my hair, but the different transitions that it took from childhood to now.
Yeah, mine's been transitioning now for almost 20 years. And this is all the more it seems to want to go. So
Yeah, I mean, for me, I mean, I got a ways to go to get to get to this ZZ Top looking beard, but we both share a lot of white, which I think is a distinguished color.
I really do as well. I mean, what else would you go with, right?
That's right. White is also is pure. White's it's purity, it's pure spirit. I mean, look, I mean, just you could tell who we are, the essence of who we are, just by the color of our beards.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I'll tell you what, with that in mind, being as pure as you and I are, uh, what's your favorite thing to do to intentionally waste time?
To intentionally waste time, I like to play gin rummy on my iPad, and I'll usually do that at the end of the day at night when I want to just kind of relax, especially after I put in a full day of doing stuff for school because I teach as I teach at a local university, Utica University, in the Pratt School of Art. I teach psychology courses and death, dying, and bereavement at Utica University, as well as care of the human spirit. So after putting in a full day of prep, grading, I just kind of and just doing other stuff. Um, I just like to kind of unwind and just play mindless gin rummy and imagine myself as a gin rummy champion of the universe.
There you go. Yeah, it sounds like some fantasies that I've had about hold'em poker. So,
Yeah. Yeah. But that's kind of what I do just to waste time.
um, I'm looking forward to this one. What's your favorite movie to watch alone?
Oh, that was an easy one for me to answer. Field of Dreams with Kevin Costner.
Beautiful.
And I'll tell you why, Bill. Um, One, it's just the acting with Ray Liotta and the other actor who I blanking on his name, but I love his voice. Um, and I forget he just died recently, and I'm blanking on his name.
James Earl
Um,
Jones?
James Earl Jones. Thank you.
Try to help.
Um, Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Just a great cast, and also the end of the movie where Kevin Costner has a catch with his father. And I cry like a baby every time I see this because my father left me when I was 5 years old, left me and my mother. My mom raised me as an only child. So
Wow.
every time I see that photo, I see that the end scene where Kevin Costner asks his father, Dad, do you want to have a catch? Because that was the one thing that he refused to do because of conflicts that he had had with his father, as part of the storyline. So when he does that, it's like there were days, Bill, that I wish I could have gone back on my past, seen the ghost of my father as a young man, and just had asked him, you know, um, what contributed to you leaving? And I realize now it wasn't because he left me because he didn't love me. He left me because he did love me. His history did not allow him to stay in a traditional marriage. His history was one of, you didn't set down roots, particularly if emotional attachment was asked of you. If emotional attachment was asked, you booked. And I think he did the best he could. And I realized after about 55 years, after he left, I realized that he left because he did love me. He did not want to interfere with, with my mom and in my development. And but every time I see that movie, I got to watch it 100 times, and I'll still have the same reaction to the scene at the end of the movie. So that's why that movie's my favorite to watch alone because I can just be with my emotions, cry, do what I want to do with that. And it's a movie that I like to watch alone because it's like at that moment I'm also bonding with my father.
That's absolutely amazing and very wonderful. And I'm pleased for you. That's a special gift that he's given you to be able to connect with him in that way.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. And I look at that as I'm bonding with the memory of who I believe he could have been, and I think who he is now in spirit. He's one of my I think greatest teachers today.
You're always listening for him, aren't you?
hmm And I love him as much. I love him as much as the mother who raised me for all of my life.
Yeah. I get it. I really do. And I mean, beyond the euphemism of I get it, I'm getting it at a gut level.
Yep, yep.
My dad's
And
gone now too, Dave, and that's what I'm saying to you. You know, would I love to have a catch with him again? Damn straight I would.
oh yeah, yeah. And I think we all yearn for that, no matter how long it's been or how
Yeah,
short it's been.
and no matter what the shortcomings were of the way your childhood went. So
hmm
you get one dad, you get one mom, and when they're gone, nobody ever takes their place.
Yep.
So, all right, this one is the first time I've asked a college professor, and so I'm really kind of interested how this is going to go. If you were to have an action figure made of you, what superpower would it have, and what color would its uniform be?
Leave it to you to ask me this tough of a question for the first time. And I had to think about this, but for me, I would want my superpower to be invisible.
Yep.
And my colors would be lavender because that is the favorite color of my 18-year-old daughter, Janine, who I think, as you know, during our introductory call, she transitioned, and I call transition from the physical plane to the spiritual plane at the age of 18 on March 1st, 2003, of a very rare and aggressive form of cancer. And that was her favorite color. I would also use green because that's a color of camouflage, and that's typically associated with invisibility. Um, the reason I would pick invisibility is I like to be able to kind of like not say much when but I like to observe. So I'd like to be invisible doing it. I like to kind of take a look at the landscape around me, take everything in, not respond to it right away, but
Yes.
just take it in and respond to it when the time is right. So it's part of me kind of like liking to be invisible, not having people knowing what I'm doing, but yet I'm being able to blend in and observe what I see going on around me, and then try to integrate it into my own reality or my own perspective or belief system. So it would be invisibility.
I like it. So I'm assuming that there'll be times when you'll be visible.
Well, yeah, when I'm teaching, I'm very visible. When I'm doing my podcast, I'm very visible. So I'm I'm very visible when I'm doing that, or when I'm doing speaking and speaking or workshops, I'm very visible. But there's a time to be visible and there's a time to be invisible. So it's learning for me, it's learning to find the balance. And it's learning that not everything that I see requires an immediate comment from me. I can simply withhold that comment until the time is right, until the
That's a
timing is right.
superpower for some people.
Yeah.
That is a superpower for some people right there.
Hmm.
The ability to hang back and realize you don't have to catch every ball that gets thrown.
That's right. I mean, we can choose to let some balls go by. We can choose to drop a couple of balls.
Absolutely. So one last question. Would you have a cape?
Uh, no, I think if I had a cape, it would take years of therapy for my students to unsee that, especially if I had tights.
Oh,
So
Lord.
part of the invisibility, Bill, is just not being that obvious. So I would probably wear just a hoodie, jeans, you know, with maybe lavender and green hues, and then just become invisible at will, just blend in with the surroundings.
Yeah, there's the makings of a new serenity prayer right there, Lord, give me the strength to be visible when I should be and invisible when I'm not, and the wisdom to know the difference, right?
Yeah, you got it. So, I tell my students because, I kid around saying if you saw me dance, there wouldn't be enough therapy for you to unsee that either. So,
Yeah.
I'm not going to bust a move in class just for fear of, unless you sign a disclaimer notice first saying I'm not responsible for any changes in your mental health as a result of seeing what you just saw.
And post a $5,000 bond, right?
And post a $5,000 bond. Yep. And, and to make sure, and I would probably have to change my phone number too, or email addresses or something, just so their parents would have trouble finding me. Another part of my technological need to be invisible. I could do that on a technological standpoint, from a digital standpoint, to be invisible.
Let's tell the truth, ladies and gentlemen. That's just plain hiding out, right?
Yeah, you got it. You got it. You got
It's
it.
a time for everything in the season, right? Every
You
season,
you got it. You got to know when to hide, and you got to know when to be invisible, or when
right?
to hide and when to be visible.
All right. So now we know what a superhero is like for a college professor. Excellent.
Mhm. Well, I can't speak for all college professors. I'm sure they would have a different version of that, but for me, it's invisibility. And the best supervisor I ever had, he was an ex-Navy SEAL commander, and he was a social worker. So you want to talk about a combination of
Wow.
skills. He knew how to build teams. He knew how to put people in places to succeed, and he always preached about being invisible. He spoke to the clients that we dealt with at the addiction center that we worked in. Be invisible. Do your job. Don't draw attention to yourself. And that always stuck with me. That always stuck with me is that the importance of being invisible,
Yeah.
so that you
Yeah.
draw attention to what you need to draw attention to, and not to any behavior that's going to detract from the mission.
It's a famous Pacino saying in Devil's Advocate, never
Mhm.
let him see you coming, Daniel.
That's right. Or let them see you coming, Daniel. Yep, and that's it. And always the element of surprise.
So, what did you want to grow up to be when you were 5 years old, Dave?
Well, when I was 5 years old, Bill, it was about survival for me because that's about the time that my father had left. And in fact, the last memory I had of my father before he left was my two uncles pitting him up against the wall and threatening to do bodily harm to him if he had hurt my mother again. And I was in the kitchen. I remember as I was 5 years old, I was eating a bologna sandwich and I saw this. And that was the last memory I had of my father. I think he left shortly after that. So at 5 years old, it was, we moved around quite a bit. My mother was always worried that my father was going to come back and take me and from her. So we moved around. So I didn't really, it was more about survival during those years. But I can tell you when I was about 10 or 11 years old, I wanted to be a lawyer because I watched Perry Mason.
Yes.
Um, and I love the way Raymond Burr conducted business. And I said, boy, when I want to be just like Raymond Burr, and I wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
Um, that never happened. Obviously, my career path went to a different way, different direction, which I'm grateful for. But when I was 10 years old, I wanted to be a lawyer just like Perry Mason.
Funny. When you say Perry Mason, immediately in the back of my mind, I hear, Your Honor.
Yeah, Your Honor. Yep.
Prosecutor Berger.
Or I hear Della, or I hear Paul. I need this.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, with this famous sidekick Paul Drake and Della Street, and
Love.
Raymond Burr was a great actor. I don't know if he ever truly got his due, but he was really a great actor, and he did some really great character roles, and he
I
was one of
tried it.
my idols.
Definitely. I agree with you 100%. He was a formative influence on my life as well. I learned how
Another
to argue watching his show.
another point of alignment.
You got it. So, what's your greatest accomplishment, Dave?
Oof. I had to think about this because, I don't know if I've had a greatest accomplishment yet. I think I've had a series of milestones. If I look at what I've accomplished, and I would just assume go from that tact. One, it's being a parent, to three really great children. I've got two boys. One older is 41 years old. His name is Dan, and another younger son, 35. Janine, who would have been 40, was the middle child. So I had the privilege of raising three great children. So um, I'm a grandfather four times over, a great grandfather twice over. So those accomplishments in terms of categories of family are meaningful to me. As far as work, um, I think, in education, I was able to get my MSW after a 25-year journey doing it. Um, so I mean, there's a variety of different accomplishments. If I had to say a great accomplishment, this is going to sound, but it's actually re-engaging in life after my daughter's transition, and re-engaging in life with purpose and acceptance of the fact that my life wasn't going to be the same anymore. And I think I could that to me was a very pivotal accomplishment for me because everything else kind of grew after that. I was able to do other things and use my teaching background and education background to provide service, to do workshops, provide education on the grief journey. Um, so that's kind of a multi-categorized answer. But the other thing is, if I said I had the greatest accomplishment, this is my greatest accomplishment. I avoid that because to say that for me would give me an excuse to stop learning and growing. And I don't, so that's why I don't say this is my greatest accomplishment. I think there's more in front of me. I've got a lot more to learn. I've got a lot more to learn from everybody around me, young and old. And my greatest accomplishment, I think, is yet to be written, and may never be written in this lifetime, and may continue in other lifetimes.
Yeah. I think that's, healthy advice as far as I'm concerned. It's it's sage to appreciate the moment for what it is and move on.
Yeah.
Like we see so many kids who they peak in high school or they peak in college and then they
Yeah.
go out into the world having done great things, academically or in sports or something of that nature. And they just can't replicate that high out there in the world and they turn to other things.
No. And I think the more diverse experiences we have, the more that we can allow ourselves to have, the more learning stays fresh, the more we're excited about learning, and the more we're excited about continuing to grow.
The key to a long, happy life is ongoing growth and development.
And engagement. I really believe that. I think research has shown that engagement equals longevity. If we're engaged in life, we're engaged with people, it extends our life more, extends the quality of our life more. I have no illusions that I'm going to be immortal.
Yeah.
I know at some point I'm going to be dancing in another dimension, but before I do that, I want to have the best quality of life that I can for as long as I can. And the way that I can see doing that is through engagement, both with mind, body, and spirit.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you. And I also want to acknowledge your decision somewhere along the way to get back on the horse of life because you could have made another decision. And
Mhm.
what was authentically you decided that, no, we're not done yet. We've got some more stuff to do.
I didn't do it, and I didn't do this by myself. I mean, if we're gonna embrace transitions in life to or growth, we don't do it in a vacuum. We do it with the support of others, and I have the support of many, many individuals along the way, Bill. Um,
I agree. It's the same philosophy. We talk about, death is something that you have to do alone. No, there's a whole community of people that's there, that's going through and living that experience with you. It's just not something that they can articulate what it's all about or what it means or anything else, but they are every bit as much a participant as you were. Yes,
Hmm.
both coming in and going out, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. I appreciate what we're putting out there because everyone in our world is grieving something.
Yeah, I mean, if you live long enough, you're not going to get through life unscathed. And there's going to be challenges, and the quality of our life is determined by the way we address challenge, by the way we transcend it. And I was saying this, I was recording a podcast yesterday with somebody who experienced a loss. We were talking about that. We have no control over the challenges that are going to befall us in this life. What we have control over is how we respond to them. And you're
Yes.
right. We have a choice. We can choose to respond, or we can choose to stay stuck. You know, and we can do that, and particularly after we've kind of let the pain of grief envelop us. There's a moment of truth. Do I want to move forward? Do I want to stay stuck? And a lot of people would look at me and probably disagree with that, but it's true. We have a choice in terms of how we choose to handle challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. You know the old Jim Morrison quote, "Nobody gets out alive,"
Uh huh.
and he died before he could add the next sentence, which is, "And they're going to rough you up pretty good before you get there."
Yeah, and I remember Woody Allen saying something to the effect that I'm not afraid of death. I just don't want to be there when it happens. You know,
Exactly. That
and
almost
that's
sounds like a Groucho line too, but
yeah,
right, I've
or
heard Woody.
Yogi Berraism, either one of the two. So
Yeah, that's that kind of thing that you really don't want to be there when he visits.
that's right. Yeah, well, and there's also I think there's been accounts that actually the spirit leaves our body just shortly before the physical body dies. So maybe Woody Allen knew something we didn't.
Yeah, it'd be an interesting question to ask him when he's on my podcast, don't you think?
I think so too. We just have to dial 1-800 Pearly Gates.
Exactly.
See if we
If
can
you're
get them down there.
Woody
Woody, if you're listening, man, send a sign to Bill.
or to Dave, either one of us, we'll stay in communication. We'll get it done.
You got it.
So, Dave, who's your favorite person to listen to?
Oh man. Um, I love voices. Voices will draw me. And Morgan Freeman, I can listen to Morgan Freeman all day. He's just got that very gentle, present voice. John, we just talked about him earlier. John, you know who I'm talking about.
James Earl Jones?
James Earl Jones. Thank you. Sorry,
Yeah,
James.
that's all right.
Um, but James Earl Jones, Morgan Freeman, these are voices I can listen to, I can listen to these guys anytime, any day, just because of their presence, their voice, their knowledge, and they're very unassuming and humble as they present it. The other person who you might not even think would be on anybody's list is Neil Peart, the late great drummer of Rush. I've seen interviews with him.
Oh,
The
wow.
the man is brilliant, and he's a brilliant. They called him the professor because of his brilliance and creativity with drums and writing. He's also he's a great writer as well too, and an adventurer. And a lot of people may not knew that about him. But I could listen to him all day too. Not only his music, but also his interviews. And he would be one guy that if I had a wish in terms of who I could have dinner with, Morgan Freeman and Neil Peart would be two of the people that I would want to have dinner with, you know, and just
I'll
pick
tell
their
you what,
brains.
I will take that under advisement. I've always been a Getty fan, no doubt
Mm,
about it.
mhm.
Uh,
Yeah,
I've not heard Neil speak, but I'll put it on my list now.
yeah. I mean, you can look at interviews he's done about drumming and about everything else, and he's just brilliant. His books are he's as brilliant as a lyricist and drummer he was a brilliant writer. I mean, a lot of his books of Ghost Rider Travels on the Healing Road was the book that inspired me because he experienced two tragedies in his life where his wife and daughter transitioned within 10 months of it with each other. And the family that he knew was was obliterated within 10 months. So he took a 55,000-mile road trip, communed with nature, documented the trip, and to find himself. And he did.
That's another whole podcast in and of itself. We'll get together and we'll do a freelance one on that. That's a heck of a notion to make a decision to go take care of yourself for a while.
Yep.
I don't know a lot of people that would be awake enough, to decide to be able to do that.
Yeah, he made that decision a year and a day after his daughter transitioned that he was just going to go on the road. He told Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeland, "Consider me retired."
Yeah.
And he went and basically and in his words, to determine the type of person he wanted to be and the type of world he wanted to live in. And I always use that quote in my death, dying, and bereavement class and in talks that I do, because that speaks to what everybody needs to do when they're experiencing life-altering challenge, whether it's due to loss, due to death, or due to other types of challenge. We have to determine, who am I now? And what kind of a world do I want to live in? What kind of a world do I want to create for myself now that that the landscape of it is permanently altered?
Well said. Well said. So please complete this sentence, Dave. When I grow up, I would like to
Be like Maury Schwartz of the Tuesdays with Maury fame, with Mitch Albom. Maury Schwartz, as you know, he was a professor at Brandeis University. Mitch Albom was one of his favorite students, and Maury was Mitch's favorite professor. Mitch took 5 courses with him. They had office hours on Tuesday, so therefore, when they reconnected again, it was Tuesdays with Maury. And Maury did something in the 90s that probably nobody would do, and then it was considered a visionary. He was dying, and he wanted the world to know this is how you die. And so Ted Koppel did a series of interviews with him on lessons on living. Mitch Albom wrote the book, which became with Maury, which became one of the best-selling memoir, as far as I know, in history. And Maury Schwartz taught us not so much how to die, but taught us how to live while you're dying, and how you can use your end of life chapter as another means of spiritual growth and introspection. And I thought I show that I have the book as part of required reading for my death, dying, and bereavement class. I show the lessons on living interviews, and it's like his lessons 30 years later, 30 years later, or more than 30 years later, are still relevant now. And I've had students tell me that, 'cause I wasn't even born when Maury Schwartz was around, but his teachings resonate with me.
That's the measure of a classic, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I told my students if I could be as eighth a good of a teacher as he was, I'd be a happy man. And he was to me the consummate. He was another person you would put on my list for dinner that I would love to have a conversation with.
Absolutely. Well, there's also an element of how good the student is too, and I suspect you were a damn good student of his.
Yeah, I still am. I
Yep.
still am. He's still, every time I read his book and grade papers that are part of one of the written assignments is based on the Tuesdays with Maury book. It's almost like I hear his voice in my head, as I'm grading. I consider him to be a partner in crime with me in terms of in a partner teaching the course, because I take a lot of what he did to connect with students, and I try to emulate that as well too.
Can you feel it?
Hmm.
Woody,
Yeah,
Neil,
Woody Neal.
they're all smiling at us right now.
I hope so, because when we remember their names and we talk about them, they're never forgotten.
That's exactly right. Till the last person utters your name the last time.
Yep.
Beautiful. So, it's a very interesting line, but what's the most important thing in life to you right now?
Well, I think, I look at it now. I'm 69 years old. I feel good, but I also know that there are more winters behind me than there are in front of me,
Yeah,
and so, and I'm very, very conscious of that. So it's to live each day to the fullest. It's to be the best father, grandfather, great grandfather I can be, the best professor I can be, the best husband I can be. It's just to live life to the fullest, live it with compassion, live it with a giving heart, and be grateful for every day that I can sit up and take nourishment. Um, so that's what the most important thing in life to me right now is to, because I wake up every day and I thank the Lord for, well, thanks for letting my body work. Thanks for giving me another day to do what I'm passionate about. Thanks for giving me the day yesterday to do what I was passionate about. Thanks for letting me wake up today, because it isn't a given. I mean, sometimes I'll ask myself, why was I allowed to grow older, Bill? Especially when I've seen, my daughter transition at a young age, and individuals who are younger than me are transitioning all the time. And I'm thinking, oh, what's so special? But it's that's a question that's going to have to remain unanswered, because I don't have the answer to that. I don't think anybody does. I might know once I get to that next dimension and there's a review of my life to say, this is why your life was orchestrated the way it was. This is why we gave you X number of years to do what you needed to do. This is why your daughter was only given 18 years to do what she had to do, because in sacred law, 18 years was enough for her soul to learn the lessons that it had to learn, for her to teach through her presence. And now it was time for her. Because in the afterlife, we don't need a wristwatch. We don't go on physical time. From what I've read about the afterlife, we don't do that. So 18 years in sacred law is a long time, but in human law, it isn't. In human law, their lives are just beginning. So
It's a lovely thought. And sometimes you might find out that there is no why.
no. And I tell people, Bill,
That bumper sticker that says shit happens.
yep. Well, and the other thing I tell my students, anybody, we have to learn to live with some ambiguity. We're not gonna, we have to learn to live with the unknown,
Yeah.
and we have to learn to live with the mystery. And I mean, Native Americans talk about the great mystery, and I believe in one of Kent Nurburn's book, Wisdom of the Stones: Life Lessons from the Native Way. And Nurburn is one of my favorite writers, and he's respected in Native American culture because he writes authentically about the culture,
Yeah.
and he doesn't write it from the perspective of being, being a white man. Tries to reflect very, very accurately the traditions of Native in their words. And one of the things he talked in the Wisdom of the Stones, there was a Lakota elder that he said, life isn't a puzzle to be solved; it's a mystery to be honored.
Yes.
And and a lot of times it's difficult to understand that when you're going through the throes of, and really, of early grief. But as I look back on it, yeah, it is a mystery, to be honest, because we're not going to have the answers to everything that we want. And we just have to embrace the mystery and accept that it is a mystery. We're not going to find out until it is our time. And it may not be our time on earth. It may be our time when we get to another dimension, when we find out exactly why we were allowed to do what we did, and live as long as we did. And we embraced the path that we did.
Yeah, there's a Buddhist tenet also that says that the path to wisdom is where you stop learning, and when you can sit and dwell in a question without needing to have an answer,
Yep.
you don't need wisdom any longer either.
And once you dwell in the quiet, you silence your mind, the answers come to you anyway.
Yeah, and it's not like explaining what happened, it's like explaining what you do next.
Yep, exactly. And even
No,
if the answer is there's no answer, but at least you discovered that in the quiet of your own mind.
absolutely, and when you can be with that, you're a powerful human being, you know?
Yep. Yep. And that's the path to acceptance.
Yeah, so here you are, you've got, good Lord, probably hundreds of thousands of wise cliches and just all sorts of prescriptive things that you've worked with until they're no longer cliche. They're actually tools, which is really remarkable. And you traffic and live in the coin of the realm, being death, dying, and bereavement, and being kind of a Sherpa for people who those are scary words for.
Hmm.
So I gotta ask you this one with all due reverence and respect. What would you like to leave in the world after your life is done, Dave?
Well, one of the things I would like to be remembered to the extent that people will remember, and I don't want to be forgotten. I want to, And I think that's a fear that a lot of us have is we're going to be forgotten once we're gone.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not expecting people are going to have their names, uttered from their lips, 24/7. But I would like to be remembered. I would like what I believe I've left that I've taught to to my students, to my children. I want those lessons to go on long after I do. That I want those lessons to continue to live on and be passed on to others, because if those lessons are passed on, we will live on in the hearts of others, and that's really all what I want. I would like to have happen in the world is just to leave that type of that, hey, Dave taught me a couple of things, and I think I can use that moving forward and pass it on to something else. And if that happens, wherever I am, I'll be satisfied with that. That was a life well lived for me.
Yeah, it sounds to me, I would label that as like, legacy technology for living. For here's the tools, ladies and gentlemen. A minute to learn, a lifetime to master. Kind of like chess.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I used to play chess. Then I got out of the habit. Now, if you ask me how to play chess now, that's like not even in my remote memory bank. My hippocampus, I couldn't go far enough my hippocampus to pull that out. So, and that's long out of short term and long term memory.
Yeah, I actually love it. I think the whole notion of having the distinctions that you do at the ripe old age or young age of 69, however you regard it, it's kind of a healthy way to sit and try to make sense of what's going on.
Hmm.
So, do you go to the baker much?
Do I go to the baker?
Yeah.
Uh, as far as I have a couple of really good places locally that I'll go for good cookies and muffins.
Well, here's the thing. When I was growing up, we had a baker in our community, and that woman was fantastic. Every time we went to go see her, if we bought 12 of something, we always got a 13th one free. Kind of like the old Chinese restaurants, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, with 4 you get egg roll, or there's some free fried rice in there or something like that. But here's your baker's question, which is a little off track to everything that we've been talking about so far. But what do you say is the thing that most people misunderstand about you?
Well, the old saying, "Don't mistake my kindness for weakness."
Yeah,
Um, I think a lot of people don't understand that I may know more about a situation that I'm letting on about, because I try to observe, and I very much I will quietly and not do it with any fuss. If I will quietly back away from individuals who no longer value me, or organizations who no longer value me, and I'll do that, and I'll come up with a very legitimate reason in writing for that to happen. But as I've learned, in the working world, the reasons that people state that they're doing stuff on paper isn't always the reasons that they're doing it. It's kind of like more like a cover story. So I may not say a lot, but I pride myself, and I'm not saying this with any arrogance. I just pride myself on knowing what's going on and maybe not revealing that I do until the time is right. And a lot of people think, well, Dave isn't saying much, so he's probably in agreement, or he probably isn't aware of the full scope of the issue. But I'm aware of it. I'm just choosing not to say anything about it, because to say it in that setting may not be the right place to do that. So I may hold that, sit with it, and give my opinion in a way, or my observation in a way that I think is going to be more heard, and it's going to allow me to continue to stay invisible.
sure. Yep, all things in their own time, right?
Yep. I mean, I like to draw attention to the things that I do, but I don't like to draw undue attention to myself.
Yes, I'm with you. Produce a result and let people appreciate the result, and whether they give you credit for it or not, it kind of doesn't matter, does it?
No, it doesn't, because I think the other thing, and my supervisor I mentioned before, who best supervisor and mentor I ever had in a workplace, he taught me, he said, never take credit for other people's accomplishments. Always give credit where credit's due. So when I became a middle management supervisor, and the director would come up and say, "No, you really did a good job with this." I said, "Well, it wasn't me that did it. It was you need to give the credit to this person, to the staff person who did it."
Yeah.
Um, she came up with the concept, she came up with the design, and she did the intervention. I said, I just signed off on it. I said, you need to give her credit where credit's due because she made both of us look good doing that.
You can credit me for being brilliant for hiring her, and now
Exactly.
I'm trying not to get in her way.
Well, that's one of the things that I think is kind of a misguided assumption from leaders is that good people can be a threat to a leader. And that's furthest from the truth. If you think good people are a threat to you, then you're insecure as a leader, or you're not really a great leader at all.
Yeah.
The best leaders I know are the ones that have people around them. They put people around them that one are better than them, have more skills than can complement their deficiencies. They give them a task. They're very direct about what happens, what they need happen, and they just let people do their jobs, and they're a resource. That's
Yeah.
what my supervisor is, who was again the next ex-Navy SEAL commander and CSW. He knew how to build teams. He knew how to put people. Everybody had a role. Everybody knew what their job was. We just had to pull our strengths together for the good of the team. That's what he taught us.
Yeah.
And that's what and don't take credit for something you didn't do.
Yeah. And again, there's so many things that we're talking about that I actually think we could talk for hours and hours and hours on any given subject that we've covered today. So,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, I just have one kind of a question to sort of tie this all together. Are there any like last thoughts that you've got, or maybe something that you thought of after you were speaking in a particular area that you just want to leave with people to consider, or as kind of like a thought gift?
Yeah, I think sometimes people underestimate the impact that they have on others. And I would tell individuals, don't underestimate the impact that you have on anybody in your life. It may be as simple as opening up a door for somebody who's having a bad day or is thinking of completing suicide. It may be just doing something nice for somebody. It doesn't have to be major,
Right.
but understand that everything that you do has an impact somewhere. And you may never know what that impact is, but as long as you are leading with with love, with genuineness and integrity and compassion, you're going to have an impact on somebody. And trust that when you put what you put out is going to multiply. And if you put out love and compassion to somebody else, they're going to show love and compassion. And that's just to another person and down the line. And that's what's going to make the world a more peaceful, inclusive, and tolerant place if we all do that, one person at a time.
Great message. I appreciate it, Dave. Do you have any questions of me?
No, I think this was a whole lot of fun. I had a great time talking with you. This is different from podcasts that I'm used to doing. Obviously, um, with just in terms of my background and my history with grief and loss and doing work in that area. But this has been great because these are great questions, and this gave me an opportunity to also talk about things that I might not have considered otherwise but also are a big part of who I am, and much of which drives the service work that I do now. So thanks for that.
You're entirely welcome. It is my privilege and pleasure. I appreciate having you on today. Thank you for that. And I think before we sign off, I just want to remind everyone that we're not in this journey alone. There are people in your life that you should reach out to. Text message, telephone call, maybe an email or something. Just let them know that your life works because they're here. And that if they ever need you, they should always call you before doing anything that's life changing because you'll be there for them. With that said, Dave, thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you as a guest on my porch. Thank you so much.
Bill, it's great sharing a porch with you. Next time we got to do an early morning one so we can both have coffee on the porch.
We do pretty well with our coffee, don't we?
I do. That's something that is a staple. That's one of my only vices I think I have is coffee.
Uh, I'll tell you what, I have other vices, but I really love my coffee. There's no
Me,
doubt.
me, me too. Me too.
All right. Well, God bless you, man, and be well.
Thank you, Bill. You too.
All right. Bye for now.
You've been listening to Simple Questions for 100 People, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can find every episode at exvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcast app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you find podcasts.